Andy Pace with Green Design Center. They're a green building products company. He also runs the Non-Toxic Environments podcast, which is great. If you haven't heard it, you should definitely subscribe. He also runs a healthy building consulting company. So without further ado, Andy,
Sure.
Thanks so much.
All right, so thank you very much. First off, I've been in this business for about 33 years now, and I was mentioning to a few people here tonight that back in the late 90s, early 2000s, I was involved with the Wisconsin Greenfield Home Program and helped co-author that, and then I became a board member of the USGDC Wisconsin affiliate. So the name South Face has just always come up in conversation, and so shout out to you and to what you've done here. This is phenomenal. I mean, it reached even to our little neck of the woods up in Wisconsin, and it was very, very, very helpful for everybody, especially at that time. You know, I remember going to my first Greenfield conference was in Portland, Oregon.
Yeah.
It was in a hotel conference room, right?
Yes.
And it was awesome. It was this energy that you couldn't beat.
That was fun.
None of us knew what the hell we were doing. But, I mean, we just loved to be there because everybody had that same vibe, that same idea of what can we do to make our industry better. And I can honestly say this is the first time since then, the last year and a half, that I felt the same. Our industry right now has the possibility of completely changing the paradigm of construction. All of us here today. When the building industry kind of took a hit in 2008, many of you were in business at that point. I remember sitting at my desk going, what are we going to do? Everything is going to heck. When money came back into the market, those who were so interested in green building brought their money back in and said, you know what? I love the idea of the building green for the environment, but it's got to also be healthy for the occupants. And I've always focused on that in my business with Green Design Center. I started the first healthy home supply company in the country back in 1992. It was called Safe Building Solutions. I changed it to Green Design Center because the word green finally had something to do with other than a color. You know, it was actually a concept. But I focused on human health first. My internal motto for the company has always been, what good is saving the environment if we're still poisoning the occupants? And I use that every single day. I have nothing against high performance building, energy efficient building, sustainable construction methods. It's fantastic. And that's what you all do great. I focus on health. I focus on making sure that the family who lives in that house is living in a healthier environment. So I have, back in the early 90s, I became the national distributor for a brand called AFM Safecoat, Paints and Finishes. We distribute that part to a number of stores around the country, and we also sell direct. We are the national distributor for a product called Callowell, which I'll talk about a little bit. If anybody's involved in mold restoration projects, even in new home construction, we're using it now to essentially as a prophylactic coating to eliminate a lot of those possibilities of mold down the road, while meeting the ICRC S520. And that's what's important about this. And so I've always tried to find ways to make home construction affordable and healthy. Instead of just trying to do what we can for that top 1% who can afford every bell and whistle, let's do things for the masses. Let's do things for everybody. So that's what my company is focused on for all these years. I still operate it today up in Wisconsin, and we ship worldwide. So that's the end of my career. All right, thanks. Should I go right to the presentation?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. You're welcome. I love and I hate PowerPoints. I have a PowerPoint just so I can keep myself on track. I might blow through some things because it might be way below your knowledge base. All right, you all have been in this for a while, but it just kind of gives you a view of how I approached this industry, or how the industry kind of fell into me. So we're going to talk about the history of our company, why we started doing what we're doing, the rise of green building, if we all remember that in the early to mid 90s. Some of you do anyway. Some of you are as old as I am. Home problems, what we've actually developed in problems because of trying to chase metrics. greenwashing, which everybody knows what greenwashing is, but I'm going to talk about some specifics that might be interesting to you. And then the healthier trends and solutions. At any time, if you have questions, please ask. I'd rather have conversations about projects you've got going on or things you're doing. Yes, sir.
You guys do ask questions, please let me hand you the mic. Otherwise, it makes the editing process very difficult.
Wow. But yeah, I'd rather have meaningful conversations about actual things going on than you have to watch and listen to my PowerPoint, right? Let's try to solve some problems tonight. So I got involved in my family business back in 1989. Right out of school, I decided that I wanted to work for the family. We have a commercial material supply company that was started in 1937. And so I get out of school, and for the first 3 years in business, I was working with architects, engineers across the country to help specify and detail specific materials that had to do with concrete restoration and waterproofing, mainly. In 1992, I was working on a project in Milwaukee where we are supplying a water-based epoxy floor coating system for a below-grade parking structure, a 3-coat system. After the primer coat was applied, we started getting phone calls from people living in the condos above, complaining about the odors. We thought, well, I mean, some people just look at a can of something, see it open, and they complain. That's what we thought. We also thought, it's water-based material, it's not dangerous. We learned the hard way that is absolutely wrong. So they started applying the first coat of product onto the floor. 3 of our workers were rushed to the hospital because of inhalation complications. Wow. They could not breathe because the curing process of the epoxy was taking the oxygen out of the room. And so now here I am, very young in the industry. I'm possibly going to cause our 50-year-old company to go out of business because of this situation. So I searched around the country and I found a little company called American Formulating and Manufacturing, AFM, out of Riverside, California, that made paints and coatings specifically for people with chemical sensitivities, environmental illness, sick building syndrome, terms that I've never heard in my life. But I researched. I got the presentation from AFM. They told me how to fix the project. Everything went great, finished the job. More importantly, it was like this light bulb went off. If there are products out there specifically for people who are sick, wouldn't they benefit everybody? You know, why should we supply these materials only for people who absolutely have to use them because of their health conditions? Maybe we should supply these products for people so they don't get sick. So I thought, I'm going to start a retail company. I knew nothing about retail. I came from commercial construction and architecture, and very little time at that. So I started this company called Safe Building Solutions. About 95% of my customers at that point were people who had multiple chemical sensitivity, MCS, which before that it was sick building syndrome or environmental illness. MCS was actually at that point in the early 90s was about to be added to the American Medical Association's list of diseases. Never got there. Never got there. We'll talk about that in a while. So why did we get into this mess? Well, first off, the oil embargo in the early 70s. Buildings were now starting to get tight. I mean, there's some experts in here who can talk about this better than I can, but when you reduce outside airflow and you tighten up the building to reduce cost, you also decrease proper air in the space. You increase the potential of the buildup of chemical off-gassing affecting the occupants.
Increased lawyers, that's the name.
Well, yeah, they're very good. And so it's interesting that this happened so long ago, and yet we find ourselves sometimes in the exact same situation. You know, and I'm maybe jumping ahead, but look at what happened in our industry with green building in the 90s and in the 2000s. Everybody started chasing metrics, and then somebody had this. Well, maybe we should think about the humans that live in these buildings too, live in these homes. And so now at that point, you started seeing legislation happening around the country. You have to add in ERVs to all the homes. It's like the industry is thinking of performance before they're thinking of the customer, before they're thinking about the health of the occupants. That's my personal opinion. So the energy efficient trend, the unintended consequence of doing the right thing. I love every aspect of the high performance home industry, sustainability, utilizing exotic techniques like sidewall to build homes. I think is so cool. I love it. But it doesn't solve a problem with the health of the occupants. So, chemical sensitivity, if you've ever dealt with a client who's had it, this is how it happens. Typically, it's something like a massive exposure. Somebody walks into a neighborhood that just got blasted with pesticides. It could be Legionella at a conference in Philadelphia. It could be somebody takes a certain medication or uses a certain skin cream and all of a sudden causes a skin reaction. A medical event, childbirth, a car accident, any major surgery can cause a complete change in the body chemistry, leading to a chemical sensitivity, mainly because of inflammation. Yes, sir.
Is that measurable at all? Like, can you say there's some metric that that shows that someone is chemically sensitive, or they just say they are?
So that's a good question. Can you measure chemical sensitivity? This is why it was never added to the EMA, because of the fact that chemical sensitivity kind of became a sort of a catch-all term, almost like fibromyalgia and other terms. Basically, the medical community didn't really know what it was. And now we kind of know that it's actually because of something like CIRS, chronic inflammatory response syndrome, which is a medically testable disease. Chemical sensitivity is a symptom of CIRS. Chemical sensitivity is a symptom of Lyme's disease. So now we know. There's actually a genetic test, the HLA-DR test, that actually shows that if you have a predisposition to have the inability to filter out mold and chemicals in your body, about 25% of the population has this, carries this gene, whether you know it or not. So, yes, it is testable. It may not come across as saying, yeah, you have MCS, but if the symptoms and the descriptions fit, and you do the proper genetic testing, you can say unequivocally, this is the problem. So that's why I say I'm so excited about this industry, because we now do have medical documentation. We now do have something we can point to, and it's not just them hoping and crossing their fingers that it's this. And people who have MCS, if you've ever dealt with clients with it, it can be an absolutely debilitating disease. One of my very first clients, again, jumping ahead here, but one of my very first clients on a whole home restoration project in 1996, she lived in one room of her house completely coated in aluminum foil for 3 years. She could not tolerate the off-gassing of anything. I worked with her and her husband to actually remodel the house, and she lives in that house today, and she sends me a Christmas card every year. The fact of the matter is that these people do exist. Whether you understand it or believe it or not, they exist. And that's the problem our industry has had for all these years, is that people would say they have this chemical sensitivity, they can't be around these products, they get a headache, and it's usually an eye roll, and this, okay, sure, they're one of those people. But this is a real thing, and this is something that I deal with. I've worked with now over 30,000 clients in my career. Anywhere from just helping them pick out a color of paint for a bathroom all the way to new home construction. And we can actually design and build homes for these people, but it's not a cookie cutter approach. It's not something that everybody with MCS, everybody with CIRS can tolerate this home. Every situation is different. I work with these people one-on-one with their designer, architect, the builder, with all the subcontractors. We choose everything that goes into that house to make sure that it's something that they can tolerate and they'll do good with. You also have to remember that anybody who suffers from chronic chemical sensitivity or CIRS, their stress and anxiety level is way beyond what you'd imagine. And so all they need is for somebody to tell them it's going to be all right. And you'll notice the shoulders drop and they finally say, thank you for listening to me. Thank you for helping me. And then they let all their family and friends know these people did it for me. And so this is why I say, again, this is an exciting time to be in this industry, because we can actually help a lot of folks.
And
yes.
Can I throw in one potential resource for everybody.
What if you don't know?
Yeah, there is a resource. You can Google CIRS symptom cluster chart, and you can. That's the predominant way that physicians are diagnosing. So it's not lab work. It's literally a symptom checklist. I know this. I was diagnosed MCAS and CIRS and mast cell activation syndrome all at the same time. So I was that sensitivity and had a child who would be qualified as what we call the canary in the coal mine.
Oh, yeah.
This is how I found your company. But if you're working with a client who seems chemically sensitive, you can have them take the CIRS symptom cluster chart. It's 14 categories of different body systems that would have symptoms.
Thank you. That's a great observation. All right, so other ways that people become chemically sensitive, we talked about medical events, long-term exposure. This is somebody who works in an industry for a period of time, and yeah, I knew a lot of floor finishers in my day that would use these 2-part polyurethanes for finishing hardwood floors. Had absolutely no problem with it. One day, all of a sudden, a rash from the tip of their fingers up to their neck, and they couldn't get rid of the rash anytime they used that product because their body finally said, enough, I can't do it anymore. If you've ever heard this term before, that we're all born with like this 55-gallon drum in our body that collects chemicals and filters it out. Most people, 75% of the population, have this ability to filter out. Those with chemical sensitivity, they can't. So what happens is that drum gets fuller and fuller and fuller. And at one point, the body says enough. It could be at age 6 or at age 60. And all of a sudden, the chemicals just start pouring out and they react to everything. And that's what multiple chemical sensitivity is. And they just do not have the ability to filter out these chemicals from their body. And then any underlying condition, we talked about Lyme disease or something like that, could cause a chemical sensitivity. All right, greenwashing. Just a little bit on this, the do as I say, not as I do mentality. I heard that a lot in the 90s and 2000s. I'll just go through these really quickly. Internally biased decisions, I get to this day, I get this. When a paint company comes out and says that their product is, Green Sure certified. Who created Green Sure? Well, the paint company. Who created Floor Score? Well, the Carpet and Rug Institute. It's the inmates running the asylum. So if somebody's Floor Score certified, well, if you pay enough and you do the test enough, you'll come out with the results that are good for you. And I have a problem with this in most of these certification programs. Most of them are pay to play. This is why the small companies who produce really good materials can never get certified, because they cannot afford the testing. And they put that test at such a high level that only the big companies can pay for it. So it relies on people like me to convince the clients. I've had 10,000 people who are chemically sensitive, just like you, use this product and they're okay with it. Being that canary in the coal mine, they'll tell me if there's a problem with these products. And so this is how I've been able to recommend materials to my clients all these years, is based upon what my clients have said does work and what doesn't work. That's the most important for me. Whether it has a third-party certification, to me, I kind of care less, because I understand the process. Biodegradable. That's one that companies would say that their product is eco-friendly or green because it's biodegradable. Styrofoam is biodegradable. It's going to take, about 150,000 years, but it's biodegradable. Natural. That was one that natural and organic. Those are two that I think it was Walmart that came out with a line of pre-boxed foods about 10 years ago that was called like Organic Choice. There's nothing organic in the contents, but they put the name organic on the front of the box and people bought it. Natural, that's another great one. So that means we can use asbestos in all of our buildings, and that means that everybody should go outside and have a smoke because that's natural. So we don't look at things like that. If something is natural, it may be good. If it's natural flax oil that can be used to make flooring materials, that's a good thing. Now, if something is not natural, if it's a petroleum-derived material, that doesn't automatically mean it's bad either. Understand that when it comes to people with chemical sensitivity, it's all about what they can tolerate. And I can tell you that in most situations, my clients tolerate synthetic latex paint, certain types like Safe Coat, better than natural plant oil-based paints. Why? Because most of them also have MCAS, which is mast cell activation syndrome. And with mast cell activation syndrome, odors of any kind can trigger severe reactions. And typically natural products have natural odors. Single attributes, I love this one too. I mean, I got that from manufacturers that say, all of our products are made here, made here in Wisconsin, made 20 miles away from you in Wisconsin. They don't tell you that all of the components are coming from Southeast Asia. So it's not green because it's made locally, just if you're using materials that came from 8,000 miles away. Oops. Some examples also about this. If you all remember when compact fluorescent light bulbs became the big rage, that's how we're going to save the world, is everybody install CFLs and we're going to get rid of the incandescents. What happens when you drop a compact fluorescent light bulb and it breaks? Great. So what happens if you drop that on a carpeted floor? Yeah. You have to replace the carpeting because you can never get that mercury out. The state of Maine did extensive research on this and said that if you drop a compact fluorescent and it releases that mercury, it's highly toxic at about the infant height or a height of a pet. You're supposed to open up the doors and windows in your house for 2 hours to flush that out with airflow. So now we've spent money to buy a compact fluorescent to save a few pennies in energy, only to open up the doors, and when it's 10 below zero in Wisconsin to flush out the air, you've wasted 10 times that. So it's a complete farce. And from a chemical standpoint, we're poisoning the occupants with this stuff. People wouldn't dispose of them in hazardous waste like they're supposed to. They throw them in the garbage. The state of Minnesota had a huge problem with mercury and lead in the groundwater because of fluorescent light bulbs. Throw them in the garbage. So we have to think smarter about these things. From a building standpoint, any of you remember the big boom in bamboo flooring in the mid to late 90s? Where does all bamboo come from? China. How is making flooring in China eco-friendly when it has to be put onto a ship and shipped all the way? You can actually argue that it's better to just get hardwood from a neighboring state, or unless you make it here in the state. Understand that every container that comes from China is sprayed with pesticides, whether you like it or not, and they won't tell you what they use. So we have customers, anything that's made in Southeast Asia, they have to inspect and chemical test because it could be loaded with pesticides that are illegal in the U.S. because China doesn't have to disclose what they use. And these chemicals could cause serious issues for our clients. Also, when bamboo flooring first came out, they marketed how hard and durable it was. It was 25% harder than red oak. So if you know what bamboo looks like, and every 12 inches there's that knuckle or node, that growth node. If you take a Jonka ball test, drop it right on that knuckle or node, yeah, it's 25% harder than red oak. Test it anywhere else in the middle, in the meat of the bamboo, it's softer than pine. But it was marketed as being really hard, really durable. Oh, by the way, it's also highly subject to mold. It molds very fast, and it has to be glued together. It's cut into little pieces and glued together, and they just only recently started using formaldehyde-free adhesives. So it never really was eco-friendly, but it was marketed as such. Yes, sir.
Also, you can't sand it and recoat it like you can conventional hardware.
You need professionals who've been trained on how to work. It can be done, but most won't want to do it because it's a grass. It shreds. It doesn't sand. So I remember giving a presentation to an architectural class at UW-Madison many years ago, and I said this exact same thing. And I saw one person in the back of the class, and I can tell she was she kind of raised her hand. She was, we just installed bamboo flooring in our kitchen. And I said, okay, well, do you love it? She goes, it was the best. We love the look of it. It completely met the design. We designed the whole house around it. Every day we wake up, we walk into that kitchen, we love that floor. And then I said, well, then there's your healthy home attribute. We have to remember that maybe it's not the best product, like I've just described, but if it makes you happy, it makes you feel good, it lowers your stress and anxiety, then you have to use that as a healthy home attribute. And that's something I'll talk about an awful lot with my clients is we have to get back to how does it make you feel instead of what box does it check? What number does it achieve? How does it make you feel? Do you love it? I had a client that used natural linoleum, the affordable marmoleum in their home, and it was in the middle of a kitchen. Half of it was as red as that door right there. The other half of it was bright yellow. Wow. Right in the middle of the room, and just split into those two colors. And she said, "Oh my gosh, we absolutely love it." She goes, "My parents live with us, and they're both aging, and there are some neurological problems with my dad. But when he wakes up and gets his cup of coffee every morning, he feels bright and cheery in that room." That's a healthy home attribute. We have to get back to those type of things instead of just chasing the numbers. So in the late 90s, I created a program called the Degree of Green System, mainly because manufacturers will throw terms around all the time, like our product is green for this, that, and the other. We found that there are 27 reasons why you can call a product green. Out of those 27 reasons, we boil it down to three main categories: human health, environmental health, and sustainability. And I'll just, you can read through this and see. But basically, these are the reasons why a product can be called an environmentally friendly material or a sustainable material. Again, I focused on the human health aspect of things. When clients come into our showroom in Wisconsin, they're asking about all these things. So what we wanted to do was, if a customer comes in or a customer calls you and says, "We want to design a green home, can you help me?" Well, what do you mean by green? I mean, that means so many things. Let's boil it down. So we created an actual survey that they would take, and it would give us a score of what they lean to. Because everybody would say, "Oh, we want it all. We want to be energy efficient and sustainable, and everybody wants the healthiest house possible." But they always lean in one direction. And so this series of questions help us glean exactly which direction they leaned if they didn't know. And then we knew, as material suppliers, how we would focus what they're looking at in the showroom, what they should gear towards, what to spend their time on. So it made it really easy for me to train all my salespeople. Here's how you work with clients who say they want green, but they don't know what green means. Now, this was, again, many years ago, and so it's a very old system for today, but we still kind of use the whole concept of this every single day. When it comes to human health, again, what does it do? What good does it do to save the environment while we continue to poison the occupants? Chemical sensitivities, allergies, and asthma, autism. We work with a lot of families with autistic children, and we know that the number is going up on a yearly basis. And we're finding that autistic children do so much better in an environment that doesn't have high chemical off-gases. That's why we specify flooring materials that don't release chemicals, paints that are completely free of chemical off-gases, really good air purification systems. This is a spectrum of the market that 10 years ago, 15 years ago, it was maybe once in a while. This is something that we deal with probably on a weekly basis now in clients. The low to no toxin focus, again, this is something in the last few years, ever since COVID, has become kind of the key for us. People living in their homes, working in their homes, spending more time inside. And we already spent 80-90% of our lives indoors. That was before COVID. COVID made it worse. So now the focus is, if I'm going to be here working while I'm doing this, I'm doing the Zoom call over here, I'm going to be fixing this little flooring area over here, I might as well use materials that are healthier for me and my family. So it's becoming on top of mind for them because they're dealing with it on a daily basis. Again, I'm running through a lot of this stuff. Please feel free to ask questions if you have any. Yes, sir.
Get a microphone.
Jill, can you talk about the low VOC or no VOC products we see in normal stores versus stuff like AFM Safe Code, and what's measured in the other ones versus Safe Code?
Chris, ask and you shall receive. Perfect timing.
Man, that was a setup.
Yeah, perfect. So I was around in the mid-90s when the VOC regs came out. And if any of you were as well, you have to recall why it was done. It was done specifically because of outdoor air pollution. Why are VOCs regulated by the EPA? Outdoor air pollution. There's no regulation by the EPA specifically because of indoor air pollution. It's all because of outdoor. It is true, some VOCs, many VOCs are very dangerous for humans. It's also true that some VOCs are completely harmless. So, a VOC, a volatile organic compound, any carbon-based molecule that's readily vaporized at room temperature that could rise to the atmosphere, react with nitrogen and UV to create low-level smog. That's the EPA definition. Inside of your house, there's not enough nitrogen and not enough UV to create low-level smog. So then it becomes, is it a dangerous chemical? Is it an HAP, a hazardous air pollutant? That's the question that we ask. I don't care if it's a VOC or not, because if you peel the skin of an orange, you've released 850 grams per liter of VOCs. Doesn't mean it's going to harm you. On the flip side, if anybody ever used nail polish remover, that's acetone. Acetone's not a VOC. It's a highly dangerous solvent that's used in paints, in zero VOC paints and coatings. They don't tell you because it's specifically exempted by the EPA because it's not photocatalytic. It does not create outdoor air pollution. Same with ammonia, butyl acetate, trichloroethane, and 37 other chemicals. So we do not look at materials based upon whether it has a VOC or not. We look at it, does it have any HAPs, which is another EPA moniker, a hazardous air pollutant that's actually a cancer-causing agent. So we look at products whether or not they're HAP free or not. Most products aren't. We also, people will say, well, look at the MSDS and safety data sheet. They'll tell you right on the safety data sheets. No, it won't. Does anybody know why safety data sheets were created? Well, why specifically? Yeah, usually it is. Why specifically? It was because of firefighters and first responders who have to gear up in a fire or an automobile accident, a trucking accident. It has nothing to do with you using those products in your house. People always refer to the SDS and say, well, there's nothing on the SDS sheet, I guess it's safe. Well, by that measure, that means there's nothing in the can, right? We all know that paint's made with about 80 different chemicals, but there's nothing on the SDS because an SDS only has to list anything that makes up more than 1% of the volume, and that is deemed a hazardous chemical. If it's less than 1%, or if it's part of what's called a proprietary blend, it does not have to be listed. So what good is the SDS? It means absolutely nothing. The next best thing would be something like a health product declaration, a declare label, something that actually gives us ingredients. But even with that, you have to be mindful that a lot of times that's not third-party derived. That's the marketing department telling the declare people what they want on the label, what they'll disclose. Yes, sir.
Is there anything in California that's not toxic?
Is there anything in California that's not toxic?
Yeah. Because everything has that declaration.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, California is, it's interesting because, you know, a lot of times what happens in California 10 to 15 years later happens throughout the country, but then it gets kind of like fixed before it gets to the rest of the country. You know, they're the ones who started with their South Coast Management District with the CARB compliance, the California Research Board. Like MDF and plywood can't release more than 50 parts per billion of formaldehyde. Well, 50 parts per billion of formaldehyde, that's still well above the OSHA level. So, I mean, they're not as stringent as they think they are. But you're right. I mean, they label anything as a Prop 65 warning because it could have lead in it. If you walk outside and dig in the dirt, there's lead in there, so I suppose that could be a Prop 65 warning as well. So, I agree. There's really nothing, I mean, everything, there's no such thing as a perfect product. I'll put it that way. Everything has its pros and its cons. It's my job to make sure that the pros for that customer outweigh the cons. And then that's why we choose materials. All right, so VOCs. When you buy a zero VOC product, like I said before, you're not buying a toxin-free product. You're not buying a healthy product. You're buying something that meets the EPA regs. Understand that when VOCs were first regulated, they were regulated kind of like the CAFE standards for automobiles. Manufacturers had to reduce their overall VOC release amounts to an average level, which means they can still make the solvent-based polyurethane floor coatings, but then they have to make the equivalent amount of zero VOC products. And what happened in the first 10 to 15 years, companies would manufacture hundreds of thousands of gallons of product and never actually go out for sale, to sit in the warehouse so they can still make their other stuff. So I don't trust the intent of most manufacturers. They say, oh yeah, we're doing everything low VOC and so forth. That's like saying we're building to code, which is the absolute lowest level of proficiency. Any questions specifically about VOCs? Yes, sir.
So you mentioned code, but I also hear a lot of builders, architects, homeowners saying, hey, I'm building to Earthcraft certification. I'm building towards this standard, but they actually don't get the certification, which if you're not testing, how do you know you're actually getting that? So that's just a general comment. I'm not asking for feedback from people in this room because I know how you guys feel about that. But with regard to the certifications that you see out there for a green building, which ones do you think have the best emphasis on indoor air quality?
That's a tough question for me to answer because and I admittedly, I resigned from the USGBC in protest because they weren't helping humans. I thought their product, I had too many customers going to Elite Platinum building and had to walk out in minutes because of the chemical off gas. I had large builders who would buy some product from us for the project, mix it in with the 90% of other stuff they bought that's highly toxic, and submit our materials for the certificate. So I don't necessarily trust the process of that. I'm more of a people person. I like to have a meeting with everybody involved in the project, and you develop communication and level of trust with everybody. To me, it doesn't matter whether a home has a certificate on the wall or not. To me, it matters whether or not those people can live in that house and be in the healthiest environment possible. I like aspects of a lot of them, but some things just don't make sense to me. I forget which one it was, but you have to buy things that are within a 500-mile radius of the project or 300-mile radius project. Who cares where it's made? If it's healthy, I'd rather get the healthiest stuff possible. Well, it has to do with energy efficiency and sustainability. I understand that. From my perspective, who cares? If I can buy marmoleum from the Netherlands and I know it's completely toxin-free, it's antimicrobial naturally because of linseed oil, isn't that better than buying something made closer but may have a whole host of synthetic chemical that off gas for 15 to 30 years? Probably. So it's been difficult because I don't have that product, that program that I can point to say, follow this one. I think all of them have aspects that if we could put them all together and make our perfect project, that'd be awesome. But it's hard to do.
So what do you recommend for just the trades that want to do the right thing, but not necessarily have a client that has MCS, but we want to use products that are healthy? Where do we go for that and to find something that's good information versus greenwashing?
Sure, that's a good question. It's obviously you're in a different industry than a lot of the folks here. You're in mold restoration, mold remediation. Yeah, you want to trust your subs and your suppliers, but do you have that level of trust with them? If they come back to you and they say, "Oh yeah, well here's the SDS. It's it'll tell you everything you need." You kind of know they don't know what they're talking about already, right? There are.
But in the absence of anything else, what do we supply our clients with other than the SDS?
Yeah, you with testimonials from people you've used it and done well with it. I would take a testimonial from a customer far more than reading some technical data sheet. If you had a customer that has they're going through cancer treatments and they're living in this house healthy and they have no immune system left, and you've done your job I would have them write a testimonial because that's a hell of a lot more important than what some data sheet says. You know, that's how people are buying materials. They're buying materials based upon what others have actually experienced. And so I would say any of those types of clients that you work with, reach back out to them and ask them for their personal testimonies.
You should also get my card. Being the process when you're going through like your SPC process, post remediation and removal. I work directly with clients who maybe have multiple chemical sensitivity, mast cell activation syndrome, really have to be cautious of the products you're bringing in. And people are still liking to come in with standard mold mildew cleaners. And what you really need is a non-toxic, surfactant heavy, just soap for your first step of the SPC.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, Dawn dish soap is great, but I was reacting to Dawn dish soap when I was diagnosed with MCS. So I had to find a non-toxic option that works just as well, that is not approved per IICRC standards, but gives my clients better outcomes. We talked about encapsulants earlier. Well, I'm not using encapsulant paints. I'm using a hypochlorous spray with a chloride solution that can be fogged throughout the home and then wiped down with the multi-step process with a microfiber cloth instead of encapsulant paint. But it's always bio-individual. It's based on each individual person that you're working with. And then we were talking about building back. That's where your building biology and building science can play a role, where you can say, well, let's look for, instead of a synthetic insulation, let's look at a rock wool insulation instead. So it's like a multi-layer process, but it definitely has to do with how sensitive the client is.
Yeah, and I'll add to that specifically for mold remediation, you know, those of you who are kind of in the know about this, is the protocol, the IICRC S520, which is the protocol on how to do proper mold remediation. In that is that you're supposed to remove mold from wood. It doesn't say how you're supposed to, it just says remove it. So if you are offered the ability to have a coating material that's fully breathable, perm radiant 80 or higher for its lifespan, that you can apply to the wood without sanding, scrubbing, wire brushing. All you have to do is vacuum and apply 2 coats, you can close up the wall. It eliminates 75% of your labor, allows you to do more jobs at a lower cost to help more people. Would that be something you'd be interested in?
Callowell,
Yes, sir.
Lime Prime.
You got it.
Can we buy it on your website?
Yes, you can. Thank you. But honestly, I've been at this too long to be cordial about this sometimes. I'm to the point where I've become more blunt. Our industry, the mold remediation industry, sucks right now because of the fact that we're not willing to look at other alternatives that are just as effective, save a lot of money, but for fear of some people in the industry who are very, very vocal, who write a lot of books about mold remediation, say you can't use that because it's an encapsulant. It's not. Yes.
In Wisconsin, is mold remediation a licensed?
Yes, it is. It is.
Not in Georgia?
Not in Georgia, no. No. And like at lunch today, we were talking about this. Like in South Carolina, I mean, it's the Wild West in South Carolina. I mean, there it's like you give them recommendations. Yeah, we could, but we don't want to do that. We'll just do it our way.
Well, I hit up the Secretary of State and I said, we need these trades licensed.
Yes.
That was one.
Yep. So
And then home inspectors. Yeah.
I'm on the board of an organization called Change the Air Foundation, and we're actually working with states and municipalities around the country to try to get laws enacted for that. So if anybody's interested in getting involved in changetheairfoundation.org, please help, because we're trying to change the industry.
Yeah, great. I can give you.
Doesn't help me at all, but it helps me, at least as I get to the point where I'm going to retire from this, I could say we left a good mark in this business.
Are you working directly with Brandon Jacko?
Yeah, he's a friend of mine. And so it was formed by Brandon, Mike, and Kendra. All right, any additional questions about VOCs? Do we all get that? I mean, do we all understand now that VOCs mean absolutely nothing when it comes to human health? Or do you still believe it does? Because it doesn't. Some VOCs do. Most don't. All right.
I've got a question.
Yes, sir.
Reminder about trained so well.
I did that. 7 meetings.
Is it true that the rate of off-gassing with VOCs increases as temperature and humidity increases? Is there a correlation between the two?
There is a correlation, yes. That's a good question. So I had a project several years ago where a client was extremely sick in her home and had air quality tests done and so forth. I went in there, found high levels of formaldehyde in the house. We couldn't figure out where the formaldehyde was coming from, anything typical, except the company. Now, the company had been there for 34 years, so you'd think it would be off-gas by now. No, it actually released 450 parts per billion of formaldehyde in our tests. Carbonate. Yeah. There was a scientist years ago who actually did testing on carbonate that showed that even after 20 years, carbonate can off-gas enough to kill laboratory rats in her testing. Because formaldehyde will release anywhere from 30 to 50 years from a surface like that. So, but we also found in her house that what she was doing to get rid of that horrible problem, she would open up the windows in the middle of summer to get fresh air in the house. Mm-hmm. The house has 70% humidity. So I told her to close the windows, turn on the air conditioning, get a dehumidifier. I'll come back in 2 weeks. I came back in 2 weeks and the humidity was down to about 46%. I tested the carpeting again. The off-gassing went down to under 100. So as moisture releases from a surface, it carries with it the chemical footprint of where it was. So the more humidity, the more moisture that's coming out of a surface, the more chemical off-gassing. The higher the temperature, it can excite the chemicals so they become active and release a little quicker. But it can also be detrimental. You remember when was it HAL 11 that came up with the idea of baking out a building? Mm-hmm. Right. Do you also remember that several months later he came out with like part 2 of it saying, don't do it because you're going to poison people to death, literally. It was debunked by himself pretty quickly because he found that when you heated up a space to 100 degrees for, I think it was 3 weeks, to flush out of the air every other day to get and reheat it up, so forth, you would void every warranty of every product in that place. You would cause all these chemical compounds to form that wouldn't have formed unless you heated up the space that high. So he said, can it work in theory? Yes. Should you do it in reality? No, do not do it. But to this day, I still get a call a week saying, I'm going to bake out my house. I'm like, oh, please don't. Please don't. Because the homeowner version of a bake out is, I'm going to heat it up to 80 for a few days or 85 for a few days. All you're doing is making things worse. Yes, sir.
Open cell spray foam polyurethane insulation installed on a roof line, even in the interior surface is below 80 degrees. As you move closer to the exterior, the temperature's going up.
Exactly.
Start over. Open cell spray polyurethane foam is going to be in condition in a roof line that's above 80. Pick a number.
Yeah.
A lot of the time, for 4 to 6 months a year in a climate like Atlanta.
Oh yeah.
Is there ever a situation where spray polyurethane foam, even if manufactured perfectly within spec on the site, is still off-gassing? Or is it ever not off-gassing?
Yeah, so off-gassing from spray foam is very similar to off-gassing from a layer of cured paint. It lasts for about 3 to 5 years. Most estimates are that in about 3 to 5 years, any of those unreacted chemical monomers that are going to become loose are pretty much gone. However, spray foam is a little different because it's a 2-component product, and it relies on the knowledge base of the applicator, the equipment, that they're using, and how well it blends. It relies on the temperature and humidity of the job site. It relies on whether or not the person putting it on was smoking weed that morning or not. Seriously. I've seen a lot of projects like that. And so I've got a client in upstate New York who's actually putting together a class action lawsuit against one of the major manufacturers because their supposedly non-toxic product contains toxic levels of flame retardants. And those never stop off-gassing. So I'm not a fan of spray foam. I think there's a time and a place for it. I think, in Wisconsin we can do this. We will insulate the sill box. That's the best product to use for that because it gets into those nook and crannies. I'd rather have somebody take the time and cut bad insulation, push it in there nice, but they don't want to do that. So it's a spray foam. If I have to acquiesce anywhere, I acquiesce in that. But that's all. That's all I'll use it. I've helped numerous clients over the years remediate their homes because the spray foam insulation failed miserably. They couldn't move back in their home, and now we're tearing down walls and ice blasting all the cavities to get rid of that stuff. So let's go back to, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago when nobody used spray foam. What, 20? Okay, I'm getting old. So let's use those products. Let's use rock wool. Heck, I use blown-in blanket fiberglass all the time. Yes, sir.
I've heard Rockwell mentioned twice, so I'm gonna bring it up to the group. So the safe and sound, like the comfort mat that goes in the walls, they say that has as much formaldehyde as an apple or whatever because most of it's baked off when it's. But a lot of times we're now specifying the outside rock wool, the Comfort Board 80, the 110.
Right.
Some of the roofing products inside because you need it for soundproofing or boards or whatnot. Have you seen, or where can these even be tested to see how much formaldehyde those have? Those are safe to use indoors.
Yeah. So Rockwell actually makes a product called their AFB, which is a formaldehyde-free version. But I don't necessarily care which one you use because the type of formaldehyde that it releases actually makes a big difference. Whenever I talk about formaldehyde off-gassing, I'm specifically talking about urea formaldehyde. Urea formaldehyde is the one that's problematic. Phenol formaldehyde, or phenolic resin, which is used in all exterior grade plywood and OSB, it's about 200 times likely to ever become airborne. So if something's made with phenolic resin or phenol formaldehyde, that doesn't bother me then. Most of my chemical sensitive clients have absolutely zero problem with it. So
like cholesterol, you've got good and bad.
Exactly right. But they don't offset each other, unlike cholesterol. Yes, sir.
What's the difference in terms of a problem between particulate and off-gassing from foam? I'm doing a basement right now. The reason we're probably going to do foam just because we don't want to have particulate insulation and all.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, that's definitely a personal choice. I mean, again, I have my personal opinions of how things should be done, but I also have to listen to the client. If they have more of a concern about breathing difficulties, for instance, they don't want to use spray foam, but they'd rather use something like cellulose. Well, cellulose contains boric acid, which is an airborne irritant, and people will cough with that stuff for years. So I guess it's kind of up to what's the lesser of two evils for you.
Yeah, that's where I don't know how to make that decision for people. I mean, at Rockwell in particular, I mean, I thought a lot of European countries don't use particulate, like fiberglass insulation and such.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that is because of what they have access to from a material standpoint. Yeah. I hear that a lot. We should do things like they do in Europe. Well, they do those things there because that's what they have. I mean, why is all mineral paint made in Germany and Latvia? Because that's where all the minerals are mined. So that's why we use a lot of mineral paints, which I absolutely love to use. But yeah, I mean, you kind of have to use what's best for the situation, and a lot of times we even do like a rigid EPS or something like that, because ultimately the biggest fear with that is if your house is on fire.
Right.
And if your house is on fire, all bets are off, right? I mean, because anything that's plastic that melts will create cyanide gas. That's the biggest fear of that product. But as it sits there in that cavity, it's not doing anything,
This might be a dumb question, so don't judge me. Do VOCs have like a weight to them? Like relative to air, are they lighter so they rise, or do they fall, or is it different, or am I not thinking of it the right way?
So, if you think of a bowl of hot water, a bowl of really steaming hot water, this is what most people believe what a VOC is. A VOC is this vapor that's coming off of the surface. And if I were to put a piece of saran wrap over that bowl, it would stop that off-gas. If I poked a hole, small hole, all that steam would come to that one hole. Matter of fact, if you gave it enough time, all that water would also come out of that one hole. It may take a long time, but it will release. Off-gassing is the release of unreacted chemical monomers. It almost comes off of a surface like a dust. It'll migrate to the surface and just kind of release. Some of it can be have a higher or lower molecular weight to it. It just kind of depends on what it is. I target formaldehyde because it's a key trigger for people with sensitivities. It's also at a certain molecular weight that if that's coming off of a surface, probably other chemicals are as well. And we know that if we can block the formaldehyde off-gassing in the series of sealers or coatings that AFM makes, it'll also block the chemical off-gassing of a lot of stuff. And so, I mean, to answer your question about VOC release, what happens is if a VOC gets released from this surface and it gets into the air, it could float in the air, it could fall to the ground, or it could float in the air and stick to another soft surface and then enter that soft surface and stay there for years. I mean, you have the problem with mycotoxins, right? Mold mycotoxins are simply just an MVOC. It's a mold VOC. And mycotoxins can get into the air and then they can migrate somewhere and stick and absorb and come out a year and a half later and rear their ugly heads again. VOCs do the exact same thing. All right. Oh boy, healthy home trends. I talked about how the Great Recession in 2008 kind of changed the market for everybody and how people started coming back into green building from a standpoint of human health. The COVID impact of living in your home while you're doing all these projects. Also understanding that during that time, I think all of us decided, you know what? The government's not helping. The medical professionals aren't personally helping me. I need to help myself. So the whole aspect of holistic healthcare, functional practitioner on the rise around the country, like you wouldn't believe. People are taking their healthcare into their own hands, and it exactly correlates with the healthy home trends. 90% of chemical off-gassing in your house comes from the areas you can see and touch on a daily basis. So when we talk about changing home construction to make it healthier, I'm not talking about reinventing the wheel. I'm saying let's focus on the areas that have the biggest problem. Flooring materials will be number one. Painted walls and ceilings, number two. Your cabinetry and woodwork are number three. And number four will be your personal furnishings, your furniture, window treatments, area rugs, things of that nature. Flooring is number one because of the fact that you have a large area of it and it's typically thick. And when we're talking about formaldehyde coming from engineered wood, it can release for 30 to 50 years. If you're using traditional plywood as your subfloor and not CDX, a moisture exterior grade, that urea formaldehyde can release for 30 to 50 years. So what happens is you cover it up with flooring, and then 20 years down the road, the new owner of the house wants to take out that flooring and put something new in. You're now re-exposing that formaldehyde. It kind of stops for the most part while you have it covered. Then you uncover it, it starts again. It doesn't have a pressure to it the way water does coming off of a bowl of a steam coming off a bowl of water. Also, carpeting. For anybody who still uses carpeting, stop, please. It's the absolute worst thing in your house. Period. End of story.
I thought you said earlier use carpeting for pest control.
Yeah. It works. If you ever want a really good case of foot neuropathy, install carpeting. Carpeting, oh boy. At one point, carpeting contained around 1,200 chemicals that off-gassed for the lifespan of it. And again, think of things like trichloroethane, which comes off of carpeting, which is an exempt VOC based upon the EPA regulations. Yes, microphone.
What about carpeting made from wool with a better quality backing?
Great.
Any benefit there?
Yes, great point. Up in Dalton, you have a company called Earthweave that makes 100% natural wool. It's not treated with any pesticides or chemical dyes. Yeah, natural. 100% natural, meaning that it's not treated with any pesticides or chemical dyes. The only thing they scour the fibers with is a boric acid solution. That boric acid does not retain on the fibers, so you don't have to worry about that coming loose later on. The backing is made of hemp, jute, cotton, and it's bound together using natural latex right from the rubber tree. That is the safest, from a chemical standpoint, safest carpet made in North America. Up in Dalton, also the company called Wittex does a very similar product. And then in Vancouver, a company called Nature's Carpet. And those are the three companies in the world that make synthetic chemical-free carpeting. Most wool carpets that you find, like from Kerastan and the other brands, still have beautiful colors and beautiful patterns because they use beautiful dyes. And those beautiful dyes contain formaldehyde. So it's not that all wool is safe. Some can be safe and some can still be just as dangerous. Also, the carpets that are made from things like Smart Strand, which is essentially, made from ethanol from corn, just as dangerous as something made from nylon or olefin. Again, it's natural, it's not safe. Questions at all about flooring materials? Yes?
It's related to flooring and in general in homes and their qualities. I haven't heard you mention microplastics.
Mm-hmm.
So if you put polyurethane on your floor, you're abrading the polyurethane. That's a plastic.
Yeah.
A lot of people are using these laminate floors, which are basically just plastic.
Mm-hmm.
And you see it everywhere.
Yep.
Can you address the plastic issue?
Definitely. And that's something that really hasn't come into conversation until the last 2 years. 3 years with the whole talk of PFAS and so forth.
Right.
We're finding that is becoming a more of an issue with our clients. The release of microplastics does not cause an acute reaction the way that a chemical does or mold can. It's more of a long-term issue, getting into the bloodstream and never leaving. It creates what are called trihalomethanes and eats the body from the inside out. But it takes 30 years or 50 years. But yes, anything synthetic like that can release microplastics. And so the number one releaser of microplastics into the oceans, latex paint. Because we all wash our brushes and roller covers in the sink, and all that stuff eventually ends up in the oceans. So we work with companies like AFM. All their paints are microplastic, PFAS free. I've always been a big advocate for PEX piping because there's so many benefits to it over copper, but then you also have to be concerned about the actual, not even microplastics, macroplastics that come from that stuff, just from the installation process. So these are things that we are looking at for specific clients who have that concern. There are 100% synthetic-free finishes for hardwood floors that are really good. Companies like Rubio Monocoat, AFM Safecoat makes a couple, but Rubio is probably the leader in that.
Yeah.
Really good products, but you have to have installers to know what they're doing. Or when it comes to like the pre-finished products, the pre-finished products don't abrade as easy as the site-finished products, but they're more difficult to work with. And so it's one of those trade-offs. Like, again, there's no perfect product. And so if you had a list of 16 or 18 different things you're trying to avoid, you may have to not avoid this one in order to get what you want. And so it's on the radar. It's something that manufacturers are talking about now in their quiet offices. I would expect the next few years you're going to hear a lot of manufacturers coming out saying their products do not produce microplastics, they're PFAS free, they don't have any endocrine disruptors, things like that. It's going to become really big. Thank you.
Another question.
Yes.
LVTs.
Yes.
Is there any LVT that doesn't cause or trigger MCAS?
Yeah. So if I had a client with MCAS, with mast cell activation syndrome, I would send them a sample of an LVP, a cork floor, a natural linoleum floor, hardwood, and porcelain tile. Out of those 5 products, I guarantee the 2 they'll never react to would be porcelain tile and LVP. Because with LVP, most of them nowadays have what's called an SPC core, stone plastic composite core. The stone plastic composite core eliminates the need for any formaldehyde resin binder that you would have in either a wood plastic composite or the old MDF cores. So if somebody with MCAS who has a severe sensitivity to odors would smell an LVP floor, they would smell nothing. There's no aroma. The vinyls are all virgin vinyls. There's no endocrine disruptors, no phthalate release. Very, very safe from a health standpoint. I would not want to be the person making it in the factory. Everybody's seen the movies. We don't want to be living in that. I don't want to be working in a vinyl company. However, for my MCAS clients, sometimes that's the best choice because they can't afford the porcelain tile. Wood floors are too reactive from an odor standpoint and too much maintenance. And same with cork. Natural linoleum, although I love it, it has a very strong aroma of linseed oil, and some people cannot tolerate that smell. But you have to make sure with LVP, the biggest concern is in the cutting process of it, because that stone plastic composite, that stone is typically a limestone, and when you cut it, you'll release crystalline silica. So never cut that floor to install in your house. Like if you're installing porcelain tile, you would always cut outside. You should cut outside. Same thing with LVP. Cut it outside, then you can bring it in. Otherwise, do the score and stamp method, and you won't release as much. Any other questions about flooring? Awesome. Yes.
Does it matter on a hardwood floor if you use oil-based polyurethane or water-based polyurethane for microplastics?
So yeah, that's an interesting question because actually, if I look at the paint coatings industry as a whole, I'll actually argue that paints were healthier back when we used to have all oil-based paints. And the reason for that is that we knew what we were dealing with. You know, it was linseed oil and it was a mineral spirit. You know, forget about the lead-based dryers right now, because those were taken out, you know, decades ago. But linseed oil and mineral spirits, they smell a lot, but are they more dangerous than the 62 chemicals that are combined to create latex, synthetic latex? I'd say no. I mean, I'd say oil-based is actually safer. But because of the idea of having to get rid of solvents because of outdoor air pollution regulations, we've screwed up our thought process of what actually works and what makes sense. So when it comes to oil-based versus water-based polyurethanes, an old-fashioned oil-based polyurethane is probably safer in the long run than these really exotic water-based polyurethanes. But they're not really made much anymore, right? Because all the innovation in our industry has gone to water-based, solvent-free. How do you take something that's designed as a hard plastic and suspend it in a liquid state until it cures at the right place without using a whole bunch of nasty stuff? And that's what the manufacturers do. Does that help?
Yeah.
Maybe.
I mean, they're used a lot residentially still.
Oil-based? Yeah. Well, for flooring, mainly because the flooring industry and cabinetry. The cabinet industry also uses a lot of oil solvent-based, mainly because water-based stains don't look good. And so they won't guarantee their work. They won't guarantee the color match. Also, I don't know if anybody here does hardwood floor finishing, but I could take my 6-year-old nephew with a bucket of, Duraseal, fast dry, oil-based stain, and that floor would look beautiful. Because solvents do really good things. It makes the products really easy to apply. And so the industries that really focus on that, woodworkers mainly, they refuse as much as possible to use anything but oil-based stains. A lot of the water-based top coats now are compatible with the oil-based stains, which is amazing because that old adage of oil and water don't mix is actually true. So how do you get a water-based top coat to stick to an oil-based stain? Unregulated solvents. That's how they do it. A true solvent-free top coat will not stick to an oil-based stain, period. So they use water-based stains that meet the regs, water-based top coats that meet all the regs, but we don't know exactly how they're doing it. It's just a big mystery, but just magically works. Yeah. Okay.
I got a question too.
I think it's more so just a good talking point more than anything, but kind of hit on the chemical emissions from carpet, but can you speak to carpet's impact on indoor quality as it relates to them retaining particulates within them? Because I've played around with laser particle scanners and say if I'm just measuring like the ambient air anywhere and say it's like 100,000 or whatever at 0.3 microns, every single time, I've never ran into any carpet or rug where I've done this where I'll put it on the ground basically and then just rub my fingers over the carpet. It always jumps up into like the millions. Yeah. And so can you speak to that? It's kind of like the ability for them to retain carpets and how they can be cleaned.
So that's one of the bigger problems with carpet is that carpet becomes a sink for everything else. Off-gassing, carpet loves to absorb anything that off-gasses. And also understand that if you ever do like a dust test, what is dust actually mainly comprised of? Is skin. Yeah, yeah. Skin cells and dust mites. That's typically what you find in that. And so people will say, well, I don't want to use hardwood flooring because then you see all the dust bunnies in the floor. Yes, you do. That means you can clean them up. When people vacuum their carpet, they usually don't vacuum it properly. Most people want to get a Dyson vacuum and they vacuum the hell out of the carpet and they see, look at all the stuff I'm collecting. This is what I'm taking on my carpet. No, that is your carpet. And actually, many manufacturers will void the warranty if they know you're using a Dyson vac because it destroys the carpet. It doesn't actually clean it. It just removes it piece by piece. So, yeah, I mean, I would argue that wool carpet actually is better for the situation because wool naturally contains lanolin oil. Lanolin is absorbed from the skin into the hair, and that will repel dust, it'll repel stains and water and so forth. That makes keeping the carpet cleaner. So if you do the exact same testing on a wool carpet, it probably would show up a lot better, provided that people are using vacuums properly. The proper way to use a vacuum is to use it with a beater bar that's about 1/8 of an inch above the fiber. It just creates this vortex that helps to get rid of that. You never want to actually dig into the carpet the way they show because you will destroy the carpet. But it feels like you cleaned it because you see all the stuff in the canister. So yeah, I mean, I always will push for hard surfaces over carpeting.
You say it again so I can film you to show them why. So, because we download.
Are you gonna blur my face out?
No.
Okay.
It's going on YouTube, don't worry.
Is there a specific like vacuum that you recommend so that you're not just recirculating?
Sure. I like the Miele vacuums are good. Electrolux are good. There are specific brands that are actually like promoted by the wool carpet industry to say here's what you can use that won't destroy your carpet, and they're usually a little more expensive, but at the end of the day, it's going to actually cause your carpet to last a lot longer. I'm not 100%, even though it sounds like an anti-carpet. I think people want something soft underfoot, like in a bedroom. Just use a large area rug. You know, you still have something soft underfoot, but then you can actually maintain it a little easier. And a little cleaner. Some wall finish options, obviously latex paints, what everybody uses. Latex is simply liquid paint or liquid plastic. Understand that all latex paints, when you apply to a surface after 3 to 5 weeks, they start to lose their breathability. So this is very important when we talk about mold situations in homes. Latex paints, after a 2 to 3 year period on the wall, have no breathability. So any moisture that's in the cavity wall, it's trying to get into the home to dry to the inside, is stuck behind the paint, festering in the drywall paper, festering on the wood. I love AFM Safe Coat. I've been selling it for 30 plus years. I now recommend that I don't use Safe Coat on walls for new home construction. I use mineral paint only. There's a brand from Germany called Keim. It's based in here in the U.S. in North Carolina. We use that for every single project we do now because mineral paint, not only is it non-toxic, natural, 100% natural, but it's completely breathable for its lifespan. So when we talk about new home construction, healthy homes, we talk about the 90% from a chemical standpoint, that last 10% with things behind the wall from a chemical exposure issue. This is where we have to focus on to reduce or eliminate mold creation down the road. And I only have a few minutes left, so I will just say this is the most important part, I think, of what I talk about these days is that wall assembly needs to be breathable. Not breathable from a standpoint of air. You know, that old adage, the house needs to breathe, is wrong. The humans need to breathe, the house could care less. But you want to be able to get rid of the moisture. So we use, air seal on every wood-to-wood connection in the cavity wall. We use blowing blanket system. We're using a smart memory. We're using, people will say you should use paperless drywall on the whole house or MGO board. It's very expensive. Not many drywallers like working with it. There are some benefits in certain areas, but if you can only afford regular drywall, fine, just use regular drywall. Make sure though that the primer and paint are mineral paints, because now that entire assembly will allow moisture to dry to the inside, and you won't get moisture locked in that cavity. And you all know much more about building science than I do. I know healthy homes and sick people who have lived in these homes This is one of the problems that they deal with on a regular basis. Their walls cannot, as much as we try to design homes that don't let any moisture into those cavities, you're telling me that you are better than Mother Nature. That Mother Nature, it's going to rain during construction. It happens. You can't tarp everything, right? That wood will get wet. That wood has mold in it from the mill. The 3 weeks on the rail car that it took from the Pacific Northwest down here, it's developed mold underneath all that plastic that it's wrapped in. When you get to the job site, people say, well, I'll just reject the ones that look moldy. Well, you could just reject all of them then, because they all have mold on them. Right, so understand that moisture will be on that wood, mold will be on that wood. The most important thing of this whole concept here is to make sure we agree with that. We're not being too arrogant to say our homes don't have moisture or mold in the walls. No, they do. They all do. Allow it to properly dry out. The Callowell product that we talked about before, we use that now in every new home project in the country as a prophylactic approach on every stick of wood in the house to make sure that if there's mold on there, it's now gone. It's now completely eliminated with Callowell. If moisture gets in that cavity wall because somebody missed the flashing detail, the window installer didn't caulk something correctly, some huge weather event caused moisture to get into that wall, you're not going to have a mold situation. All right? So we use Callowell to eliminate that fear of what's going to happen if you have an issue. And again, I talked about earlier, reducing anxiety, reducing the stress in the consumer. The extra $2,000 you'll spend spraying Callowell on every stick in the house is long forgotten when the customer can actually sleep at night knowing that that rainstorm that we had isn't causing a mold problem down the road. So it's been extremely helpful for us. We have saved projects that are under construction that were decimated by mold, and people are living in those homes today. Yes?
Spell that.
Callywell. It is EPA registered. It meets the S520 protocol. It's not in a capsule. It is fully breathable.
You can find it at the greendesignCenter.com.
Yes. Moisture. All right. So if you hit that, you take a picture of that, you'll get to all my contact information. GreenDesignCenter.com. TheGreenDesignCenter.com is where we sell materials. It's not the end-all, be-all of all, everything that's healthy in the market. I have just a grouping of materials that over the last 30 years have been really good for my clients. So I have them for sale there. There are other products out there that are just as good. If you ever have clients that need help with material choices, there are people out there like us that help. This is all I do day in and day out. Most of my day is working on Zoom calls with clients around the country who are trying to build healthy homes and make the right choice of materials. And I just act as that assistance to the builder, to the architect, to the designer, because I can speak the language. Homeowners can't. And a lot of times the industry kind of uses that. Homeowners can't understand the language, so there's this impasse. The communication stops. We need more communication. All of us need to be on the same page for these projects to work. I'm done. All right.
Right on. Thank you, Andy. Thank you all for being here. Thank you also to the Green Design Center for being our sponsor tonight. It's always helpful. 2 quick announcements. Next month, we'll be here again. We've got Owens Corning coming in to talk about a new kind of duct design they're working on that Amelia and Mike have worked on for a while. They're trying to get past this code. And then I'm going to go ahead and announce December. We are doing a big year-end event. It will not be here. It's going to be at Construction Resources' new showroom on the west side. Sub-Zero Wolf is going to bring in their private chef to do some catering for us. We've also got Joe Stiebrick coming down as our speaker. So it's going to be a really big event. That's why we're telling you about it now. We'll send out our RSVP in a few weeks and keep it in your calendar. So thanks again to Andy. Thank y'all for being here, and see you next month.